Things like Substack have worked fairly well at what they do, but in a very monolithic way where I think there's a lot of downsides to having one platform try to centralize anything, whether it's Twitter with short form or Substack with long form blogs and newsletters. So having this openness where you can have a lot of different players that each specialize in some different way, but they can all plug together into a larger global ecosystem is really exciting.
Welcome to the Orthogonal Bet, where we explore the weird and wonderful ideas that shape our world. It's a cabinet of curiosities for the ears and the mind. I'm your host, Samuel Arbesman, complexity scientist, author, and scientist in residence at Lux Capital. In this episode, I had the pleasure to speak with Brendan Schlagel. Brendan is obsessed with learning and community and is the co-founder of Hyperlink and Leaflet, which are devoted to these topics. Brendan and I had a chance to discuss the history of hyperlink and learning communities and how it led to Leaflet, a tool devoted to easy publishing and sharing online. We explored learning and education, the power of lists, personal canons, antilibrary, and even the power of a two-person book club. This was a really thoughtful conversation, and I had a great time speaking with Brendan. Let's begin. Brendan, welcome to the Orthogonal Bet.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, you're interested in a lot of different things, and there's lots of different topics we can chat about. Maybe the best place to start is just simply with like Hyperlink Academy. Like, what is it? What has it been? Hyperlink Academy. Go.
When we first connected, and I think it was over 4 years ago now, when we were kind of early with Hyperlink and has gone through some shifts and pivots, large and small. So we'll kind of start at the beginning. I connected with my co-founder. I have two co-founders for Hyperlink and now Leaflet, what we're working on currently, and connected with Jared back in 2019. And we had a lot of shared interests around learning on the internet and so alternative pedagogy, peer-to-peer communities. We were both part of this online distributed kind of a Slack group, but also collection of local communities and reading groups called Learning Gardens. That was a touchstone. We also happened to both be tinkering with online discourse forums.
You mentioned the term Learning Gardens. Maybe you can kind of explain a little bit more about what that is.
Yeah. Learning Gardens is really cool. They ran for a few years. They started, there were a couple people who founded it as sort of a meta community of people interested in self-directed learning, local communities. There was a cybernetics reading group. There were people who did, I think we did a pattern language reading group together. A lot of people in Bay Area, New York, but really all over the place. And there was a Slack group at the center of it that had different channels for different people's interests. People were dropping links, hosting local meetups. It was a very nice emergent peer learning space as online community, but kind of bled into offline spaces too, which was really nice. So I think Jared and I didn't actually meet till after that. We had a mutual friend who was like, you guys should talk, and realized we had a lot of common interests. And so I think it was the next year, 2020, I came together with Jared and Celine, our other co-founder, and started working on what became Hyperlink. And as with many good projects, it started with a domain name. Jared had gotten the domain hyperlink.academy and started with it as basically just a web page that would collect other web pages of people chronicling their interests and learning journeys online.
Oh, that's amazing.
So you could have your personal website and you could make a page of here's the things I'm learning, or with a little more structure, here's a course that I want to put together and find other people to go through these readings with me or something like that. That was kind of the initial idea. And I think as it very first existed, Hyperlink Academy was this collection of people and their learning interests. And we started kind of jamming together on how we could turn it into something a little bit more formalized and useful for others and innovate on what internet learning can look like. And it was driven a lot by this vision of more learner-centered, emergent, peer-driven learning. It went through a few different shapes. The first year or so, we ran basically our own internet school where we had a bunch of people, friends, Twitter connections, people that we admired who we thought had interesting perspectives that they might want to teach something to others. We got a bunch of people to run these small cohorts, and we created a simple online platform where people could, as a teacher, could host those courses. We were taking the perspective of how can we make this as fun, cozy, intimate, peer-driven. So it started with courses, but we also had more flexible learning groups where people could run things like book clubs or more casual explorations. Then sort of switch modes to thinking about infrastructure and tools and how we could build the missing piece of learning software, kind of a place to have better community dynamics, richer interactions than you could have with Zoom calls and forums. We did kind of this mix of project-based spaces to share and collect notes and have information together, and chat spaces to talk about things with a cohort. The sort of end state of Hyperlink before we switched to working on Leaflet was this kind of cool mix of a collaborative surface based on different rooms where you could collect note cards and have associated chats about them. And so playing with these kind of spatial metaphors and mix of information surface and communal conversation space.
When you were doing the kind of the more formal school kind of academy, what was the profile of the kinds of people who participated, like as learners or as people who actually wanted to teach these kinds of things? Like, because I feel like, I mean, I would love it if everyone is doing all these kinds of things all the time, but of course it's only going to be a subset. But like, yeah, so what are the kinds, like who are the kinds of people that this really resonates with? Yeah,
we thought about it as kind of an internet liberal arts school. There's some other projects that have resonated on a similar wavelength. The blog Snark Market put together like a liberal arts, like a liberal arts 2.0 or something.
Like the new liberal arts. Yeah. There was a great little book. Yeah, I have that.
Yeah, really fun curriculum. And so, yeah, we were pretty wide ranging along those lines. We had a lot of arts, kind of creative writing, languages, tech, but very interdisciplinary, kind of passion-driven adult learners, people trying to go beyond the 101 kind of intro level courses to these more creative and playful, which was a little bit challenging because it meant that it was more niche, small scale. So that's kind of a big theme. We're always trying to find the balance between these really hyper specific, cozy niche communities and how to plug into larger networks and scale things up and reach more people who would be interested in this kind of thing.
Yeah. And so, so especially in terms of like those kinds of topics, and is there a sense that you're like, oh, we're going to reach the people who are already predisposed to be interested in this kind of thing? Or should there be this sense of, no, I actually need to articulate why these things are super interesting and really convince like a very broad subset of people to actually be interested in this kind of thing? And of course, I imagine it's somewhere in between. But how do you think about that?
I think definitely a little of both. So we actually worked with a lot of people who didn't necessarily have teaching experience, including ourselves. We ran courses of our own as novice teachers, thinking a lot about, structurally, like what would make for a good experience. Very classic problems that teachers of all kinds have to think about.
And then how do you think about the balance between kind of creating a space for like self-directed learning versus kind of learning things together versus the teacher kind of guiding you in some sort of curriculum versus, people just downloading a syllabus themselves and kind of going through it? Because I'm thinking about for example, like there's like the Recurse Center where they have like the whole like unschooling kind of idea where they're almost kind of creating a space for people to learn on their own. And obviously there's a collaborative effect to it as well, but it's not structured in any sort of kind of formal way, at least from what I understand. And then of course there's like people just kind of reading things together. And then you also have the kind of more, not quite like Sage on the Stage, but like something more directed. I think like the internet can be good for all these different kinds of things. And how do you think about, these different modes of learning and especially like continuing adult education or whatever we want to call this? It kind of, in terms of like what appeals to different kinds of people, should we offer all these different kinds of things? What appealed to you in terms of what you wanted to have?
We definitely played with sort of the whole spectrum there. Personally, I like things that have kind of structure as far as having time and space set aside for exploring something with other people, just to have that external motivation and bringing in different perspectives. And we had more or less structured curriculums, some courses where it was very like organized week by week, some where it was a little bit more emergent. Both of those can be nice. And then also institutionally, we definitely appreciate there's more sort of persistent schools that serve as this higher level container for people exploring something beyond a 6 or 8 or 12-week course, which is something that we were always interested in and never quite figured out, I think, with Hyperlink. But it was interesting to see at least some number of people doing multiple Hyperlink courses. We had a few teachers who would teach multiple different courses, either the same course several times, or I think a couple folks did several different courses and kind of almost created their own little mini school.
Yeah, and I guess related to that, I mean, like, is that also kind of, and one of the reasons you kind of moved a little bit more towards the infrastructure of learning was you kind of wanted to be a little bit agnostic as to what the form was? Was that kind of your thinking of like, oh, like people can kind of do whatever. If they want to build their own school and kind of create like their own little community, if they want to create book clubs or reading groups or whatever it is, you kind of wanted to create a space of like, yeah, online infrastructure and software that allowed people to kind of do whatever is natural to whatever they wanted to do.
That's definitely part of it. Yeah. And it's hard. It took a lot of time for us to work with teachers and do this kind of meta learning, organizing courses, marketing courses, that side of things. So there was definitely some appeal to us in being more of the infrastructure layer, the engine that can power many different schools and learning institutions and kind of collaborative community structures. Yeah, kind of getting into where Hyperlink evolved to. It was also, we sort of ended up going a little bit more towards creative project management tools as well. I think it was always fun for us to kind of play in the space between explicitly school course kind of ed tech learning software and more tools for thought, looser collaboration surfaces, ways of managing creative projects, bringing in people together to do different types of creative work. So the course versus the project. I think a lot of the courses that we saw that were successful had this project-based component where it's not just doing a bunch of readings together, but kind of you're working to build your own conlang or something, or make a website, like if it's very tangible kind of result artifact at the end of
so it's less about the project kind of structure as like a superset of courses or education, but more that the projects seem to be like at the project level was where people actually did maybe the most effective learning. Is that kind of the right way to think about it?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And so then
I think that makes sense.
So then how did that kind of evolve more into Leaflet, which is the current thing, which is, I guess, also sort of adjacent to all this kind of thing that we're talking about as well.
It is adjacent. I think there's a sort of natural progression if you can kind of see the through lines there. After Hyperlink the school, we went through different directions with the kind of Hyperlink as infrastructure direction. We had more of a shared wiki space we called Hyperspace that had live calls built in, which we eventually brought back into a later iteration of Hyperlink. But one thing that I think worked best in Hyperlink as it ended up, the latest version of it was this kind of composable primitives of spaces that had different rooms, where rooms could collect cards and cards could have content on them, could have text, images, and they also had a little chat section attached. So they're kind of like these very simple pages where you could have notes on your project, you could have a to-do list for a group, things you want to read, kind of simple, flexible building blocks that you could use for personal projects or collaborative courses or whatever. And so I think for us, the transition to Leaflet was trying to take the simplest, best part of Hyperlink, which was kind of that simple card or page, and extract that out into something easier for people to use, because there was this fairly complex structure to making a Hyperlink space, which kind of corresponded to a project or a course. Whatever it was a little bit complex and had high activation energy for people really having to have something specific in mind and have the time and bandwidth to put together a structure for themselves, invite friends to come in and collaborate or explore something together. So for Leaflet, we were trying to take the simplest piece of that and make this. It started out as basically a very simple way to make a document, or there's a space between document and website or web page that is also really interesting to explore. But when we first launched it, it was like this ultra minimal kind of Google Doc alternative where you could make a single document without even having to sign up and make an account. Just go to the Leaflet website and instantly start writing and we made this nice, fast block-based editor where you could add text, images, links, and more recently, we've been playing with a lot of more social aspects to this, playing with AT protocol and adding this social layer to the kind of document surface as space to do work and bring people together. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things we were exploring with Hyperlink that we're definitely still trying to
right. It
bring
still
in here.
seems like, right, like there's kind of like the learning, the collaboration, kind of the interconnection, kind of exploring things. Yeah. How do you kind of think about the uses of Leaflet? Like, is it very much this kind of thing of like, oh, this is like, it's almost like this primitive that we're kind of giving people the ability to use in all different ways? Is there kind of, are there certain ways in which you anticipate or hope people will be using it? Or is it very much just like, oh, no, this is this primitive. We're going to just give it out there. There's a lot of ways that we have seen people use it already. Very kind of interesting, different use cases, that the vision of what we would ultimately like for things that would be really cool ways to use Leaflet. And then there's where the current focus lies, which more recently has been blogging, social publishing. I mentioned we first started with these standalone documents where it's very agnostic. You could use it for anything. We imagine people using it for publishing things on the internet, sharing things with friends. The fast kind of anonymous nature of it meant that it was very useful for people who just wanted to drop some ephemeral notes in a group chat where, you want to edit the shopping list or the potluck, who's going to bring what with your family, that kind of thing. So we saw people using it to plan events and coordinate around activities, but we also did see more complex publishing use. We had some fun features, like we added a way to make nested subpages. So you could have not just a single document kind of linear page, but have sort of branching digressions or collections that have their own information. We later added a canvas feature for a little bit more visual arrangements. So trying to play with ways to keep it simple, but also open up new expressive potential. And so, people have used it for more almost like mini websites or zine-like shapes of things, which has been cool to see. And then more recently, we made kind of more of an explicit blogging superstructure on top of that, where you can make a publication and you can add posts to it. And each post is a Leaflet document. And from there, you can have whatever content you want in a post, but it is a little bit more like your homepage is a list of your posts. And so it looks like a blog or a newsletter, kind of like somewhere between Substack or WordPress or whatever. And so that's been a little bit more of a legible thing that shapes how people are using it now. A lot of people are using it as a blogging tool, and we're building it on AT protocol, the technology that powers Blue Sky, but also a bunch of other really exciting emergent social apps that run on that same infrastructure. So we're having fun there with connecting with Blue Sky, talking with other apps who are building tools for different things that could interoperate with that. Is this kind of an attempt to almost like recreate some of like the blogosphere where different blogs were kind of in conversation with each other, and now everything has kind of just moved to like a single like monolithic social media platform? Yeah. What is kind of the vision there?
Yeah, definitely trying to recapture some of the blogosphere energy, mixing the classic blogosphere with more global social media, social networks, bringing those two things together in ways that are challenging to do. And I mean, things like Substack have worked fairly well at what they do, but in a very monolithic way, where I think there's a lot of downsides to having one platform try to centralize anything, whether it's Twitter with short form or Substack with long form blogs and newsletters. So having this openness where you can have a lot of different players that each specialize in some different way, but they can all plug together into a larger global ecosystem is really exciting. Kind of a natural fit with Leaflet and Blue Sky as kind of long form writing and short form writing, the microblog and the macroblog. But beyond that, there's a range of other cool things people are building that we could see interesting paths to collaboration, like an app called Semble that's a little bit like arena, like a social bookmarking site, can collect links, and maybe we could embed those collections in leaflets, or have a way to start from a collection and make a blog post draft based on that. Just one example.
Yeah. And related to kind of the openness, like is there a sense that at some point people will be able to kind of like host their own leaflets like on their own server if they want, or is it still the idea that you're still doing leaflet? It's kind of it's centralized to a certain degree, but it's also maybe there's a sense of like, oh, it's like a kind of a small identity where anything larger is interoperating with other things as opposed to leaflet doing all of those things.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're starting to see interests and actual experiments in different parts of that kind of possibility space. So we have Leaflet as sort of the primary place to read and write these blog posts, documents, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And there are other apps that are exploring publishing tools, long form on AT protocol. And some of them are starting to have ways to read leaflets within their app, for example. And we are seeing tools like someone made a command line tool to convert from Markdown to leaflets block-based format. So yeah, there are like the way data is stored, it lives in, each person has their own repo and a kind of personal data server. And any app with the right permissions can read and write. So people can use other apps to write data in leaflet compatible format. And so we're seeing, cool experiments for converting different writing pipelines, interoperating with other tools. I think for us, a big question right now, like you were saying, can we have a way to pull in other website content into this ecosystem? What does that look like? Can we be kind of this like social RSS layer where you can have your blog that doesn't necessarily live on Leaflet, but maybe we can give you a way to pull that in and make a record that associates it with Leaflet.
As you're thinking about like kind of the longer term vision with Leaflet and all these different directions, and how does that also play into kind of the longer theme, like these kind of like these, I guess not like previous themes, but like the themes around like learning and education, and kind of like where does Leaflet kind of fit in terms of like the infrastructure there more broadly?
Something I'm excited about is figuring out what community layers we can build on top of Leaflet, but also the wider ecosystem around AT protocol and other people building different tools and communities and experiences in this space. So that could look like better discovery mechanisms, ways for people to find others who are exploring similar topics. Some of that might be things that we build, like we want to experiment with a simple global tags construct so people can have at least some way to self-organize and label the kind of topics or themes or communities that are relevant for what they're writing about. Think about more collectively authored publications. I think that would be a cool thing to figure out, like publications that could have multiple contributors. And then also just making the pieces themselves more dynamic, having kind of richer social features and ways of adding different content to Leaflet posts and documents, and not only publishing them, but having them be actual sites of interaction. And maybe that looks like a Leaflet publication serving as the homepage for a creative challenge or learning group or something like that.
And so more broadly, I mean, you mentioned like the search aspect is like finding, like when it comes to like learning or collaborating or kind of like building a community, like is the ability to kind of like find the like-minded others, like is that really the I don't know, rate limiting step there? Which it might very well be, where it's like it's hard,
right? The
internet is all interconnected and all, but there's a lot, and it's like hard to find kind of like your people or whatever the term is. So is that one of the things that you think a lot about?
Definitely, yeah. I think you're right. That's one of the biggest challenges.
So yeah. And I guess, yeah, and for someone then who is interested in various topics or learn, like, how would you, I mean, obviously you're trying to create that infrastructure, but for someone right now, how would you recommend they kind of explore the world of the internet when they were trying to create a community around some topic that they're interested in?
Yeah, it's both harder and easier than it's ever been, probably in different ways. I don't know. Yeah, there's a tension of things being more fragmented, harder to find through traditional search mechanisms, but Also, a lot of exciting new space opened up by kind of emergent alternative social networks and protocols and stuff. So there's things like on Blue Sky, you can have custom feeds. That's one of their big differentiators structurally, is being in control of the algorithm, not just having the default kind of for you discover page, whatever, but being able to subscribe and follow different topical feeds. So I think, if someone wanted to learn about astronomy, for example, there are specific Blue Sky feeds that people have made that would be a really nice curated starting point for following a bunch of accounts and related conversations and keywords about that topic. And I think that's something we would like to explore with Leaflet, and bringing together the short form and long form conversations. But I think on a broader level, the whole internet is in need of better curation mechanisms.
One of the early iterations of Hyperlink, like the Hyperlink Academy, kind of like the actual school mode, was one of these ways of kind of helping aggregate people together and like find. And of course, it sounds like some of it was you already were kind of like, it was like people already in your orbit and community. And you and I have talked about non-traditional organizations, and like there's like research organizations, there are educational institutions, things like that. Do we just need more and more of these kinds of like internet-based schools or other types of institutions? Like is that one of the ways that that we can help solve that problem around learning or finding like-minded communities?
Yeah, I think so. I know we both have our lists of alternative learning organizations and kind of new structural forms for schools and things like that. Yeah, I think, we need more of these kinds of organizations at every scale. There's a lot of great local organizations. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and there's all kinds of cool organizations like School for Poetic Computation, Boshi's Place, Recurse Center, Hex House, kind of running the gamut from formal institutions to local community spaces that might do a mix of co-working and event hosting and organizing informal learning experiences. So the kind of local sort of spectrum of online to offline, I think, is really important. How to create networks of these local communities that can connect to other ones that might be in completely different places or adjacent, have these affinities that span the internet, as well as the local ecosystems that have that kind of nice context and people doing things together in real life, I think is really important. Using the internet to connect people not on the internet.
No, I like this. And actually, and related to lists, I mean, you and I both do make a lot of lists. In fact, actually, like a lot. I think the CSS backend of a lot of my lists is actually based on like the CSS for your stuff. I mean, let's just geek out a little bit about like the beauty of lists. Like and for me, it's one of these things where it's like, it's almost just like the precondition for like taxonomizing or kind of understanding some sort of space. Like what is appealing to you though about lists and how to think about that? I feel like I think in lists in different ways, whether it's collection based things, just trying to get the pleasure of putting similar things together in order, having a container to group things and have a space for them, but also just like, writing essays, I think like in outline form. I think kind of the refinement process of gathering a bunch of stuff and then winnowing down, structuring, putting it in order. So I think, lists as a sense-making device, both personally and collectively, the personal note-taking sense of a list, and also the list that you publish on a specific web page on your site as a thing for other people to reference and put out there as this kind of touchstone for people to submit further ideas or have kind of help people think in a new way about emergent phenomenon or whatever. Yeah. Well, it also, right, like lists also, like you're right, they're not that far from other kinds of genres. I mean, you mentioned like an essay, like in outline form, like that's like an essay, and you kind of break it down to its like rudiments, and then suddenly you have a list, or like a syllabus or a curriculum. Like that is not so different from a list either, because it's like, oh, here's a whole bunch of things we're going to learn about and read in a certain order. So maybe the list is kind of this interesting primitive for thinking about sense making.
Right. Yeah, the list or the collection as the basic building block that you can then take into more specific structures, whether it's an essay or a published catalog or a syllabus. One of the coolest things I've seen on Leaflet, and is exciting kind of thinking back to Hyperlink, is can we make this a good enough tool for someone to make a really good syllabus that feels not just like a PDF, but like a living document or more of a space that people could explore and inhabit in some way.
Like what are your best hits of lists? Like the ones that kind of resonate and that you really enjoyed building or that you're constantly returning to and never quite feel done in like the best possible way.
Yeah, the personal canon one was really fun. That's the one you mentioned that
Yeah.
I published the CSS, the kind of basic structure as a GitHub project. That's an interesting one because I wish that was something that I returned to and updated more. But yeah, for whatever reason, I think my personal canon has become more fragmented and no longer kind of lives in this clean single web page.
Yeah. How would you describe personal canon? Is it like these are kind of the like touchstones for the ideas that really resonated with you, things that are almost kind of like these are the core readings or videos or software or whatever that all the like that kind of makes you like how did you think about that, at least like when you were building it, in terms of like what actually went into that personal canon?
I think and I definitely didn't originate that idea. There were some really cool examples that I pulled from too, of people sharing different forms. I think there's more or less comprehensive versions. It's like it can be anywhere from everything that you love to the greatest hits, most formative things that will stay with you forever and kind of influence who you are. And I think both of those can be fun, and mine is maybe somewhere in between. Yeah, the things you maybe can't stop thinking about years later. And I like the multimedia aspect of it as well, like personal canon across media, across genres, kind of going beyond your favorite books to websites and collections and music and cinema.
And then related to books, then you also have this idea of like I like you have like your anti-libraries, which I believe is like that's not necessarily the term you coined, but it's like, but you kind of took it very, very seriously. How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a fun one. Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about for many years and has kind of gone through different phases of like being more of an explicit collection that I've curated or a side project or community. At one point, it was a newsletter where I would share a few books every week or every month. Interesting things that I wanted to surface for other people. That the whole notion of the anti-library is like, it's really valuable to be aware of far more things than you could ever possibly read personally. But just having this peripheral awareness of the adjacent space of so many fascinating things that are out there that you should kind of try to harness and know about somehow. And so, for me, there's kind of my own proclivity to just capture any interesting book I hear about and put it on a list somewhere so that I can try to look it up later or come back to it whenever the time is right and either read it or just think about it, explore it, see what other people have to say about that book, how it might fit in with other related things that I'm trying to think about. And then, so there's like that kind of personal list making aspect and also that curatorial aspect, which I never fully put enough time into to make it like a kind of this universal ideal of like, what is the collective anti-library? What is the list of books that everyone should be aware of? I think, obviously it's hard to make any sort of universal book list, but I feel like there are at least some books that are worth knowing about for everyone. And there's been projects in that direction, like the Universal Library for Civilization, different organizations have tried to curate that sort of thing. And so
no, this actually reminds me, I built this little tool for myself. This is years ago and it hasn't been really updated, but it's this, I found a way to like scan the ISBN numbers for all my books at the time, or at least most of them. And then I had this like just giant like CSV of like the names of all of them. I made this like little script that like, I don't know, every Monday it would email me like 5 randomly chosen ones that I should consider revisiting, and oftentimes I just kind of delete the email. But it was one of these things where it's like just because you got a book at a certain point and you were thinking about it in a certain mindset, like doesn't necessarily mean that you're still in that mindset. Chances are you're thinking about new things and your knowledge has changed and your experience has changed, or it might be a book that you have that you only partially thought about and now you want to think about it differently. And kind of being forced to revisit these kinds of things is very, very valuable, which it feels like it kind of rhymes a little bit with this like anti-library kind of idea. I think one of the reasons I ended up doing it is because this must have been years ago when like my son was really little and not sleeping well, and I would have to like rock him all the time. And it kind of forced me to just like stand in front of bookcases and like look at things and be like, oh, I haven't thought about those books in a while. And I kind of realized I need a more systematic way of doing this kind of thing. And so,
yeah,
I think it could be
a systematic way that doesn't involve moving every 6 months.
Exactly right. Yeah, right.
Because that's the best way. You have to pack up all your books and
right. And then
we moved around 6 months ago.
Wow. Okay. So
that was.
So that is certainly one forcing function. Yeah.
Try to triage and get rid of the 10% that you don't care about anymore. And,
yeah.
Oh, and try to recategorize the ones that you unpack different ways as you reshelve them.
I love that. Right.
But not have to do all that work.
Exactly. Right. There needs to be a way of like, a much lower effort way of doing some of those kinds of things. And I guess maybe my last question, and this is admittedly a very large one, but like we've talked a lot about like collaboration and community and group learning and projects and for someone who is interested in all these kinds of things, but maybe is not in these communities where they're doing this maybe in a little bit more deliberate way, how would you recommend someone begin this experience of like learning on the internet or finding a community, maybe even locally, where around some topic that they're interested in? It seems as if like all your themes are around like learning and community and things like that. But for someone who's maybe not steeped in that world, what is maybe like one or two bits of advice for that kind of person?
I think if possible, starting locally is a really good way to connect with people kind of beyond the superficial social media connection. So that could look like finding maker spaces or places that host classes or going to meetups or trying to find the spaces that might be a little bit under the radar. I know that's easier said than done depending where you live, but even just finding a couple friends or people who are interested in exploring something, like going to the park and finding someone else who likes bird watching, or like, I don't know. Finding someone to read a book together. I've had a lot of success with very tiny, like 2-person book clubs, me and my wife or me and another friend. Just doesn't have to be a whole community. It can be 1 or 2 people to just have at least one other person to externalize your commitment and inquiry a little bit. And then as far as bringing that online to connect more widely to other people and maybe get more serendipity in the mix, I think just getting comfortable with posting and sharing stuff and talking about what you find interesting and what you're learning, or just doesn't have to be something that you have developed expertise in. It could just be notes as you go, questions that you have, posting little fragments and things that you think might be worth talking about. And seeking out spaces online where there might be other people interested in those things, whether it's a global space like Blue Sky and finding relevant feeds or people to follow, or things like, I don't know, niche discords. There's a lot of the kind of smaller cozy web spaces too. But I think that's a muscle that is not natural for a lot of people. I don't know that it's even natural for me, but I've tried to at least kind of practice posting, talking about things. And that can be just tiny fragments, tweet length, or it can be writing blog posts, longer things. I don't know, having casual conversations, trying to reach out to people to schedule calls, everything from the more formal, like this podcast, to there was someone who reached out who had started writing on Leaflet, who was just like, I want to talk to other people who are building on AT protocol. Like, would you be down to do a chat? And we did, like, the next day, had a little conversation. And I think that turned into a series where they've talked to several people now and used that as a way to learn more about different things people are working on. So creating structures for yourself in ways that are comfortable for you and fit with how you like to think and interact with people. So like for me, I like smaller scale things and have had success in the past with hosting small dinner gatherings for people to kind of come together and talk about books and ideas. And for me, I like that better than going to a big meetup where I have to like kind of, go somewhere else and think about more than a handful of people. So
yeah. No, this is great. I love that. Like exercise the muscle of sharing a little bit more, and also start small. I love this idea of the 2-person book club. Like that can certainly be enough. This is amazing. That's I feel like the 2-person book club is a great place to end.
So, Brendan, thank you so much. This is fantastic.
Thank you.